If you've ever wanted to make randomly generated music in Max, then this video is for you. Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Kirsten and I'm an audiovisual artist under the name Nyalki. I've also recently written the book Performing Electronic Music Live, and one of my chapters talks about coding custom performance tools from scratch. It also includes a tutorial on Max, which was kindly provided by Fracesc Moya Serra, who's an experimental electronic artist and he knows loads about Max. So Francesc is really interested in immersive audio-visual interaction and sound art, and he's also a university lecturer based in London. So I'm really grateful that he's also filmed this video for me. It's basically the accompanying video for the chapter. But you can of course also watch this video without reading the chapter. If however you want to know more about what electronic artists do on stage, please do check out my book, which I will link down below in the description. So this is going to be a slightly longer tutorial video because Francesc is going to go from a completely blank patcher all the way to creating a performance-friendly GUI that you could actually take on stage with you. So this is really interesting. I hope you find it useful, and also if you want to download this patch and follow along, I will link all of the assets that Francesc is using down below in the description. But without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Francesc now.
Hi there. This video we're going to take a look at Max 8. We will look at some basic strategies for generative music. Max 8 is a visual programming language for music and multimedia. That means that we don't need to write code, but instead we have objects that have different functions, and by interconnecting them we can create algorithms. I'm going to create a new patcher. I am not going to go over all of the different functionalities in the menu right now, but instead we'll be seeing them while we use them. So this is not going to be a Max 101, but instead a more practical demonstration. On the left hand side I can find a list of all of the objects that I have in Max. I also have a quick access here to some of the most used objects in Max. I'll go ahead now and create a button just by double clicking or dragging it. You'll see that also some objects have a shortcut, for example B for button. I can also create any object just by typing N and start typing the name of the object. In this case I'm going to create a click tilde, and I will see that objects have inlets at the top and outlets at the bottom. I'm going to be able to send information into the inlets that is going to get processed by the object itself, and it will output information from the outlets. If I hover my mouse over an inlet or an outlet, it will give me a brief description of what I can connect in there or what it will output. I'm going to create another object, in this case an audio output, and I will turn it on. In order to interact with objects, press button, turn dials, etc., I'm going to have to lock my patch. I can lock my patch at the bottom left hand side corner, and now I can press this button, and if I want to continue patching I will have to unlock my patch. I can also quickly lock and unlock my patch by clicking in the background area, command click, now it's locked, command click again, and now it's unlocked. I'm going to connect the outlet of this button to the inlet of click and the outlet of click into both left and right inlets of my audio output. Now if I lock my patch, I can see this object working by creating this little click sound. Good. In order to start working with generative music or start thinking about generative music strategies, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a time algorithm in order to create and control timing events. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new object, and this time is going to be a metro, which is a metronome object that will output a bank message at regular intervals. I will need to turn it on or off with a toggle. And in order to control the speed of this metronome, I will create a transport object. I will connect metro to transport, and I will create now an integer box in order to see the tempo, and a message box with tempo $1 and another integer box. If I connect that to transport now, I'm going to be able to change the BPM of this metronome. I could connect now the metro to this button, and before anything else, I'll have to define how often do I want this metronome to click. I can do that by creating a new object, and I will translate no values to milliseconds. The metronome works in milliseconds, time works in milliseconds by default in max. But if I create now two messages, one being 4 notes and another one perhaps 16 notes, and click the 4 notes, I will see that now that this metronome is ticking every 4 notes at 96 BPM. I can change the tempo here. Let's put it to something like 120. And if I change now and I press this other message, 16N, it will tick every 16 note as well at 120 BPM. Good. I'm going to disconnect this for now. I'm going to move all of this down here. This tempo that I'm sending to the transport is actually controlling the global transport control, and I can see that by pressing on extras on my top menu. and showing the global transport. I can see here that if I change this tempo, it changes on the global transport control as well. Next step perhaps will be start thinking about how to select certain bits in order to trigger sounds. So I will go ahead and create a new object, select. But before that, I will have to start counting these bits. So I can do that with the counter object, and I could count from 1 to 16, 8, whatever I want. So I'm going to go ahead and count up to 7. This will count 8 bits because 0 is also considered the first one. So if we create an object here to read what's happening, we'll see that is quickly counting up to 8. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's go slower to see it. Good, so now I can work more with this select object and type here what do I want to control. I could, what do I want to select? I could type 0, space 1, 2, 3. Or perhaps in order to make it easier, what I could do is I could start counting from 1. And add new object here, +1. So now 0 will become 1, 1 will become 2, etc. So I can actually disconnect from here and read it from here, and we will see that we start on 1 now. Let's go ahead and connect this to select. And if I wanted to create a very simple sequencer, what I could do now is I could get a few buttons here just to visualize this. And see what's happening. And you can see here that I have a little sequence, an 8-bit sequence. And perhaps I could now get a gate. The way a gate works is that on the right inlet I send what I want to gate or not, and with the toggle I can open or close that gate. So if I connect that to the click now, every time that the counter is on 1, if the gate is open, it will let this bang through and it will play the click. I could create a few more. And if I connect them all to click, if I hold Shift, now I can quickly connect all of them. And now ESC. Log my patch, and I could already get some rhythms. Let's go faster by sending the 16 in. Good. I'm going to stop my main metronome. And continue with this. Instead of triggering this click now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of all of this and create a few new objects. I want to select, but I will select only one. I will create a few copies of this. In the second one, I will select 1 and 5. In the third one, I could select 1, 4, and 7. You can play around with this and find different results. 1, 3, 5, and 7. And in the last one, I will select all of them again. So let's go ahead and connect to all of them. And perhaps get a few banks here to visualize this. You'll see that this is the output of if it matches 1, and this is the output if it matches 5. So I want to connect both. And finally, my last select object will connect to all of them, except the last one always. If you hold your mouse over the last outlet, you will see that I will get a bank out of here if the input doesn't match. I'm not interested in that. That's why I'm always leaving the last one without connecting. So if we turn this now on again, I see that here I get a bank every 8 bits, every 4, etc. So instead of working with that boring click sound, what I'm going to do is work with a synthesizer. So Max can host any VST synthesizers. We can, of course, create our own instruments in Max, but I'm not going to do that today. I will just work with an existing VST. And for that, I will go into my plugin section here, and I will try to find a VST that I have here, which is a 303 emulation. And I'll bring this down a little bit. And I will connect the outlets of this VST into my audio output. Good, so what I want to do now is every time I get a bank out of here, I want to create a MIDI node that will trigger the synthesizer. So in order to create MIDI nodes, the first thing that I will do, I will create a new object, which is the make node object. And if we take a look at the inlets and outlets, we'll see that on here I need to send a pitch, then a velocity value, and then a length in milliseconds, always, a duration. Good, so just to test this, I could create a few messages. I'm going to put 36 here, 100 for the velocity, and perhaps 200 milliseconds. And I will send them to their inlets. If you want to know which MIDI node is 36, you can perhaps take a look at the key slider and grab a message here, and you will find out that 36 is C. If you want any other node, you can check them here. Perhaps we could use instead 48. So let's change it to 48. Good, so how can I trigger that? Well, if I send a bang here, every time I press this button, I will be pressing these messages and send a note out. I get a message here, and I could read it. That will be my pitch, and that will be the velocity. So let's read this. The velocity will start at 100, and then after 200 milliseconds, it will go down to 0. If we change this and we make it way longer, perhaps 1 second, we will see that more clearly. Good, so what I need to do in order for this synthesizer or any other VST in Max to understand what type of information I'm sending to it, I'm going to need to format this into MIDI. So for that, I will use the MIDI format, and on the first inlet, you'll see that here I can send a list of the pitch and the velocity. Right now I have the pitch and the velocity separated, so if I want to send them in a list, I'll have to put them together. And I can do that with the object called pack, and I will pack two integers. and perhaps I can read this. Now every time I press this, I see a list with the pitch, the velocity, and then it goes down to 0. If I now send this list into MIDI format, I should be able to hear that note. Let's change the length of this, perhaps. Let's put it at 300, shorter. And let's change the key that I'm pressing. Let's go to 36. Let's go higher to 64. Good, so now I could turn my Metro on. We'll see that every time that that one gets selected, I create a note that I'm sending to the synthesizer. And of course here I could change. I can also show the view of this. This is how the VST synthesizer will look in any DAW. And if you'll see that if I change any parameter here, will change also there. Good. So perhaps now what will be interesting is to start changing these notes every time I get a bang. To do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object, which is the random object. The random object will generate a random number in between 0 and 1 less of the argument that I specify here. So every time it receives a bang, it will create a random number in between 0 and 199 in my case. So I could substitute this pitch for my random number creator. As you will see, it's playing very low pitch notes and very high pitch notes. So instead of sending that wide range of numbers, what I'm going to do is I will create a new object here that is going to be the scale object. Scale object allows me to scale a set of numbers. So what I'm going to receive is a number that goes from 0 to 199, and perhaps what I want to create is a number that goes from 48 to 59, so one scale, one octave, sorry. So if we check this now, we will see that the number is now being scaled into that 1 octave. I could of course now disconnect this from select 1 and connect it to the last one, which will play every single bit. Or connect it to any of the other ones. I'm going to disconnect this for now, turn off the metronome. What it will be perhaps interesting is having a way of changing that connection from one to the other in an interesting way. So what I'm going to do now is create a new object, which is the G switch. The G switch allows me basically to send different information in and decide which one goes out. Right now this is the path that is connected, so this bank goes out. This one is not going out, but if I click I can change the path and now this one is going out, but this one is not. So I'm going to go ahead and select the G switch and show the inspector window that allows me to change some of the behavior of the objects. And I will change the number of inputs. So right now it's set to 2, but I want 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Or perhaps I could even have a 6 because I'm going to do something with it later. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this G switch to decide which banks I want to send to the make node. I'm going to start organizing a little bit all of this, and to do that I will get rid of the things that I don't need, that are only for pure visualization. I'll try to make a little bit of space. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this and edit, encapsulate, or Command-Shift-E. This will create a subpatcher that I should rename. And by pressing Command and double-clicking, I'll be able to go inside the subpatcher. And I'm going to create a new object. And this is going to be an inlet. Now that I've created this inlet, you'll see that I have an inlet here. If I delete it, I don't have one. The outlet was created automatically because I had this connection made here. So I'm going to create inlet, connected to the bank, and I can close it now. So now I can connect that here, and this is working exactly the same as before. Instead of connecting here, we said that I'm going to use this G switch to decide which of these connections I want. So I'll go ahead and connect all of the banks here. Turn my Metro on, and by clicking, now this one's going through. Now 1 and 5. And now all of the beats. And this one is, I have nothing connected here, so nothing's going through. I'm going to stop this for a second now. Apart from clicking and changing the connection on the G switch, what I can also do is, if I send a number to it, I will be able to change which connection is the one that is open. So if I send a 1, 0, a 4, 3, if you want to learn more about any of the objects, you can always do right click on it and open the object help. Here we can see a little patch explaining how the object works. And we have extra tabs sometimes in order to see extended functionality. Same thing for any other object. What's also very useful, and that's one of the great things about Macs, is that I can unlock this patch and copy anything I want, and then paste it on my patch, and I'm ready to use it. Good, so now that I have this integer here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a way of randomly changing this connection. And I can do that again with the random number. And I have 6 different connections. And perhaps every time that I get a bang, on here, I could change the connection. That's already quite interesting. Perhaps that is too fast, so instead I could grab it from here, or I could create another select and do it in any way I want. I think I'm gonna just grab it from here. Good. I left this inlet number 6 empty because I want to try something a little bit more interesting. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create another select object, and I will type, instead of typing 3 numbers, I will type 4 eyes, meaning that I have not yet defined which numbers will get selected. So how does that work? Well, if I create 4 number boxes here and I connect them to these inlets, here I can define the value to match, the second value to match, the third and the fourth. So if I now connect this here and I get a few banks just to demonstrate this. And now I'm going to put this at 0. And now I turn this metronome on. You'll see that never bangs here. Let me disconnect this for a second. Because I haven't defined, or I have defined them as 0. But if I put here a 1, every time that I get a 1, this will bang through. If I put here a 3, 6, and a 5 perhaps, I'm getting some interesting rhythms here. I'm going to connect that to the switch here, and I will create a little gate, again with a toggle, in order to being able to turn on or off this randomization. So now that the gate is closed, the randomization doesn't go through and I can change it on my own. And if I turn on the gate, randomization comes back. So I'm just going to turn it off. I'm going to connect this back here. And let's take a look what happened. Let's change this. Good, so what I could do is perhaps change these numbers in a random way. And I'm going to create 4 copies of this random 8 and a +1. Remember that random 8 creates a random number between 0 and 7, but I'm counting from 1 to 8, so that's what I'm adding, 1. And I will duplicate this. So what I could do now is I could trigger this. In a random way. and the rhythm will change. That's already quite interesting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this perhaps every time that I get to 1. So in order to do that, I could connect that directly here. Although once we start to having these crossing cables all around, it may be a little bit confusing. So instead I'm going to use a send and receive object. I'll call it bang bang perhaps. And here I can create a receive bang bang, and it will receive that automatically as if they were connected with a cable or with a patch cord. So perhaps now I can get back to my randomizer here. Now we'll continue playing around a little bit with this and creating more interesting melodies. And as you have noticed, the length of my notes is always 300 milliseconds. The velocity of my notes is always 100. So perhaps I could also add some randomization to this. And in order to do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is work a little bit in this subpatch here. I'll make a little bit of space. And I will create a new object, which is trigger object. And I will put arguments as integer, bank, and bank. What this is going to ensure is that once I receive this integer, which is the note, that will go through. Before that, I will receive and I will send the bank that will trigger the length, then the bank for the velocity, and finally the pitch. And once I have all of them here, it will send them out. This is a useful object to ensure that you are receiving and sending things in the order that you want to do. So, as I said, I want to change this so they are not always the same. So in order to do that, first of all, I am going to get rid of these two messages. I will create instead two integers. This is not necessary, but I will connect them here. And I will create two more inlets. Inlet 2. I should be able to see that appearing already here. And inlet 3. And I will send there the values for my velocity and my length. I could create these outside, or I could create them inside here and receive only banks. So I think I'm going to do that. So I'll create another random object. This is going to be for my velocity, and as you may know, the maximum velocity in MIDI is 127. I could get that from from outside, or even from this bank here. Let's make some more space. And this is going to generate a random number between 0 and 127, but perhaps I want to ensure that I don't have too quiet notes. Notes are too quiet, so I could scale this 0, 126 to perhaps 70 to 110. So I'm going to ensure that the velocity of my notes, it's a random value in between 70 and 110. I'm not hearing those notes because they're very, very short, but let's increase this. I'm unsure if this TB303 emulation is velocity sensitive, but anyway. I will be sending the length from the outside just to demonstrate something. So I can close this. And now from here, I will be able to define the length of those notes. So I'm going to do that. Well, I'm going to generate a new random number. And I want to generate perhaps 8 or 9 different ones. And I want to receive that with the bank, perhaps from here. So I'll create another send and receive bank 2. And I will receive that here, bank 2. And what I'm going to do now, I'm going to create a new object, which is the live.menu, that will allow me to store different information here and trigger them. I will go into the inspector for this object and change this to edit the range here, and perhaps put 1n, 2n, 3n, 4n, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100, 101, 102, 103, 104, 105, 106, 107, 108, 109, 110, 111, 112, 113, 114, 115, 116, 117, 118, 119, 120, I could also put all of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. So now every time I get a bang from here, is randomly changing that. And I will use this to send or to set the length of my notes. So I'm going to translate note values to milliseconds. And if I get just an integer here to show this, you'll see that different note values have different milliseconds, and this is related to the tempo, of course. So let's go ahead and send that information. From here or from here, doesn't really matter, to my random note. I can show this here and turn my metronome on. You'll see that I have very short notes and longer ones. Good, that works quite well. What I could also do now is start modulating some of these parameters here. It will be interesting that every time that I get a note, I change the cutoff, for example, and perhaps also the resonance. Good, so how can I do that? Well, what I'm saying is that every time I get a note, I would like to change some of those parameters. So every time I get a note, I get a bang out of here. Always. So what I could do perhaps is use that bang to modulate those parameters. So you'll see that here parameters are enumerated 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and in order to change them, the only thing I need to do is I need to get a message with the number of the parameter. So cutoff is parameter 3, and then a $1, and then a float number in this case, because I see the parameter is going from 0 to 1. And if I send that here, I should be able to move that parameter. Good, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly change that. So let's generate a random number from 0 to 100. doesn't really matter too much because I'm going to scale it. I'm going to receive a 0 to 99 and I want to change it to a 0 dot 1 dot. So if I get a bank here on every single note, every time I will be changing that parameter. Let's test it. It's working fine. I could do the same for the resonance, so I can duplicate all of this, and resonance is parameter number 4, so I will change that. And let's test it. Perhaps I don't want the resonance going all the way, so I could change here the scale and make it go only to 0.6. If I want to change these values, the minimum and maximum for the cutoff frequency and the minimum and maximum for the resonance, I only need to get few floats and connect them to the high output value, low output value, and the same for the cutoff here. So now I can set the minimum of the resonance to 0.5, the maximum to 1, and I can change it anytime. Good, that's working well. I could do the same with any of the other parameters that the plugin that you chose has. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to encapsulate this again. So, to make more space, I will select all of this, Command-Shift-E, and I will rename this as modulation or something similar. And I can put this over here. I can always label this if I want with comments. So this is the minimum cutoff. This is going to be the maximum cutoff. This is the minimum resonance, and that is the maximum. Good, that's working quite well. You may have noticed that these random notes, even if they are in a particular octave, it will be perhaps interesting to being able to filter them by scale. In order to do that, we could start working again with select objects, and that will be the most simple approach here, and only select the notes that are in the scale that I want. So I could select 48. If I wanted to do C major, for example, I will select 48 and let it through, 50 and let it through, but not 49 because it's not in the C major scale, etc., etc. That will be one approach, quite straightforward. I could also use a root pass object for that, but in order to have more possibilities and don't lose too much time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at my package manager here. And I'm going to go into my installed packages and I will look for EMIR SDK. You may not have it installed, but you can just search for it here and install it for free. So if you just type EMIR, you'll find it. I'm going to click on Launch, and this is a set of custom objects and as well pre-made subpatches by VJ Mazzo. And one of the good things about Max also is that we can repurpose anything that we find, always quoting the author and taking a look at a fair use. So I'm going to click on Launch, and in here I will take a look at the examples, and I will find the number 4 ear MIDI filtering. If I open this, and I can close now my package manager, you'll see that this is a set of subpatches that I can unlock, copy, etc. That what they do is they filter notes based on a particular scale. That's going to be quite useful for generative music purposes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock this patch and copy this B patcher here. If you take a look before we close this, I'm going to copy this. If we take a look before you close this, you'll see that this B patcher is expected to receive pitch and nothing else. The velocity of the notes go directly out and go directly to the instrument. And the other thing I will need to send in there is pitch. So I'm going to select this, copying it, close this, and paste it into my patch. If I wanted to know and understand how this subpatch B patch is made, I could hold Command double click, get out of the presentation mode, and I will be able to see here how all of this works. I'm not going to get into that now, but what we're going to do is we are going to use it. So I'm going to make some space here. And what we were discussing before is that in order to use this, we need to send to it. Only the pitch and the velocity will not pass through here. So if we take a look at our subpatcher random node, we'll see that we are packing together pitch and velocity. So if I want to send pitch only here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to unpack them to pack them again before I send them to the synthesizer. So I will create an unpack object, and I want to unpack two different integers. And if I want to visualize this, I can get two messages just for demonstration and turn this on. We'll see that the nodes go through the left and the velocities are going on the right. So I'm going to send that to the subpatch in order to filter different nodes based on a particular scale. And after, what I'm going to have to do is pack again pitch and velocity, the filtered pitch and the velocity directly, and send them back to MIDI format. I can get rid of this now, and you'll see that now all of my notes are in a particular scale. It could be interesting also being able to control the octave of all of these notes. And in order to do that, I'm going to go back into my random node here, and I will change this scale object. So instead of scaling it directly to 1 octave from 48 to 59, I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm just going to scale it from 0 to 11, 1 octave, 12, and actually that's not correct, because what I want to do is I want to be able to receive all of the notes in 1 octave. So that will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So yes, that was correct. So those notes now will be very, very low, but I'll be able to control the object. So if I turn this on now, they will be very, very low notes, as you can hear. But with a simple addition object, I will be able to add 12 semitones, 1 octave to it, 2 octaves to it, etc. So we could put that before or after, doesn't really matter. Let's put it just after here, and I'm going to receive notes, and then I'm going to add an octave to it or more. So how can I do that? I will create a dial. A dial, it will just send numbers. Just make some space here. And I can see that here it will just only send numbers. So I could actually just connect this directly here, turn it on, and move. So now I'm able to go up and down and transpose all of this. I could do like that. I could also have some messages for 1 octave. Or more. Perhaps that's the sweet spot for this instrument. It's a bass synthesizer. And I could also type that here if I wanted to. If I want to bypass this, I can. And finally, what I could do is I could use this same rhythm generator here to trigger some percussive sounds. So perhaps I'm going to use this right hand side of the patch here and we'll work with the buffer and groove objects. The way the buffer object works is I need to give it a name, so I will name it perhaps kick. And if I send it a message of replace or read, I can load a sound in there. And with the groove object of the same name, I can read it and play it. So we could go into the hell file for groove and take a look at how it works. I can turn looping on, off. If I send a 0, we'll start playback at 0 milliseconds. And depending, or if I send 1, -1, or 0, I can play it at normal speed, reverse speed, and of course if I send a 2, I would play it twice the speed. If I send a -2, I will play it at twice the speed but in reverse, etc. So I'm just going to copy bunch of things here. I will copy this, I will copy all of this and the signal generator. I just pasted that here. And remember that by sending a 0, I will be able to play this. So what I could perhaps do is I could start getting a few faders here, live.gain, that I could rename into the inspector. So in the short name here, I could name this bass. This is going to be to control the volume of the bass. And I'm going to duplicate this. I will rename this kick. I will duplicate this. I'll put a few more percussions. Let's name this hat. And let's name this snare or clap. Let's connect everything to the main audio output, left and right channels. And now I can just move them up here. And that's going to be my kick. It's mono, but I'm just sending it to left and right. So let's load a kick in here. So let's click on replace. And I have here just some samples. Click on open, and now if I actually send an open message, I should be able to see if I load it correctly my kick. Yes, and it's here. And now if I press that I want to play it forward, and then every time I send to 0, it will play that kick. That sounds good. So perhaps I could get this bank here to trigger the kick, or that one. This is called bank 2. So if I click here another receive bank 2, let's see how that sounds. Let's increase a little bit the tempo. Good, so let's do the same with a few more sounds. So I'm just going to put all of the buffers up here. So we said I want to add a clap and a hat. So I'm just going to duplicate this, change the name of it, name it clap, duplicate that again, and that's going to be my hat. And I will put some sounds in there, but perhaps I want to first duplicate all this. So this groove should read from the clap buffer, and this groove will read from hat. Let's connect this the gain controls, and let's load some sounds in there. So let's put a clap here. Let's open, check that. My clap is here. And let's put a hat, hi-hat. It's a closed hi-hat. Good, so that's my clap, and that's the hat. So what I'm going to do, I think, is that the clap, I want to trigger it less often than the kick, so I'm just going to use this bang bang here. So new, receive, that should work fine. Let's just test it quickly. And for the hat, instead of using a predictive sequencing like here, I'm gonna use this randomization here. So I can directly connect this bank here, and that will generate interesting hat sequences. So finally, what we could do is we could just work very briefly with the presentation mode. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. You can find plenty of tutorials online for this. And I will just select the things that I may want to interact with. This gate for randomization. Perhaps I could label things before doing that. So I'm just going to get a comment here. This is for random. This is for the random G switch, J switch, and what else do I want? Perhaps I want these objects here for changing the sounds. And all of the faders, they're already labeled, synthesizer, and yes, all of this. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and select everything that I need. The main toggle, I'm holding shift in order to be able to select multiple things at the same time. This is for the modulation. I will select also this. I will select the instrument, faders, the replace, and I think I don't need anything else. So now that I have everything that I want to interact with selected, I'm going to go right click in any object of those and I will add them to the presentation. Now if I switch, now you'll see that all of those are surrounded by this pink or red squares. So now if I go into the presentation mode, I can reorganize this any way I want. So that's my main, on or off. I could also create a few extra objects here. That's the random switch. Put it there. I will show the modulation. Minimum and maximums if I want to change that. And finally, to replace those samples if I want to do that. Good, I'm not going to spend too much time with it. We could add perhaps a panel that we could change the color of it. And we could send it to the back and just simply create a very basic and simple UI here. Let's change the other color as well to lighter. Now if I every time I open this this patch, I want to see it in presentation mode instead of patching mode. If I want to use this to perform or just play around with ideas, I will do right click in the empty area of the patch, making sure that I don't have any object selected, and I will open the inspector window for the patch. And I'll make sure that I tick open in presentation. Now I could save this. And every time I open this project again, it will show just like this in presentation mode. So let's perhaps just turn it on. I forgot to add the faders, all of that. Great. I hope that was an interesting basic introduction to how to start thinking about generative composition in Max. Of course, there are plenty of other strategies, and of course you should try to investigate others and expand these ideas. Remember that the best way of learning Max is simply looking at the help file for the objects. You will learn more about the object, you will see advanced functionalities of the objects, and you will be of course able to unlock copy parts and use them in your own projects. I hope that was interesting, and see you soon.
So I hope you enjoyed watching this video tutorial. I think it's really interesting to see just how powerful Max is and how you can start from a completely blank page and end up with a fully functional GUI right at the end. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you want to see more tutorials like this one, please make sure to subscribe to my channel and press the bell, and I will see you next time. Bye!